This is Flipping the Script podcast, the soon-to-be #1 leadership podcast for purpose-driven leaders and great guest experts who give us a unique insight into what leadership looks like behind the scenes. I'm Shalia Stafford, your host, and I'm committed to helping you lead your challenges using leadership strategies to gain new perspectives, fuel your growth, and transform the way you execute on your success. I am so excited to welcome our powerhouse of a guest today, Jerry Acuff, who is a transformational leader and really the living example of what leadership looks like in action. He's a proud father, husband, and the author of 4 best-selling books, and the CEO to a 30-person sales consulting firm that has worked with 15 of the top 100 brands in the world. What's very unique about Jerry is that he broke the barriers at home and in business as he overcame adversity, navigated sales as an introvert, built the corporate ladder, and then took on entrepreneurship to continue to create the impact through his craft of building relationships, sales, and growing the market share for some of the world's top Fortune 100 companies. What some of you may not know is that Jerry's actually a mentor of mine and someone who I aspire to be when I grow up. Because what's so impressive about him is that he never grows alone. He is always looking to pour into others and create more impact to build authentic and strategic leaders through his investment and desire to never stop growing and learning. Jerry, thank you so much for being here with us today. It is a treat to learn more about your journey.
Thanks, Shalia. And I must have written that introduction myself.
We have been waiting for this interview for quite a while. There is so much that our audience is going to take away today as we look to equip everyone with strategies and tools that some of the greatest out there have learned through their experiences to make your journey a little bit easier. And I know when it comes to Jerry, there is so much wisdom that he has from his experiences in life and the impact that he's creating to really go against the grain and take some big risk that paid off tremendously for him. So Jerry, in the spirit of the show, we'd love to do some fire away questions so people could get to know you a little bit better.
Sure.
You up for it?
Yeah.
What is your favorite go-to order at your favorite restaurant?
Beef kebabs with lemon soup and as an appetizer, and the beef kebabs with rice. And I take all the vegetables off and I just eat the beef and the rice. And it's my favorite meal. My second favorite meal, which is almost the same, is sushi.
Yum, I love sushi. What's the food you don't like?
Anything green.
You and my kids. I actually just learned this about him as we were getting prepared for the interview, and I'll ask this, coffee or tea?
Iced tea, unsweetened with no lemon.
What are you curious about right now?
Gosh, that's a great question. I'm really curious about, I have this virtual training program and I have a huge opportunity, I think, to really help multi-layer marketing companies. MLMs are predicated on the fact that you have to leverage relationships and you have to be good at goal setting and you have to be good at being persuasive. And so I stumbled into an opportunity. And so I've been listening to, pitches from MLM companies. And frankly, I listened to one from Amway and one from Cutco. They were horrible. And then there's another one, a company called ACN, which I think is one of the best, most impressive companies I've ever met because they don't really sell anything. That they do is they save you money on like your telephone bill or your electric bill or your gas bill. And so all they're trying to do is to help you save money. But anyway, so I'm curious about how do I, add value to those people. A lot of it, I think, is very much what I do for a living, which is tell people what to say. So like I listened to 5 or 6 webinars from the #1 person out of 250,000 and took 9 pages of notes and gave him 5 pages of ideas, and he liked them all. Because these folks are just not equipped to really think about what the customer thinks. And our business, as you know, is thinking like a customer. So my big curiosity now is sort of how to crack that code and then, continue to build our business. And then the other thing is, I'm I'm president of the athletic foundation at my college. I'm on the board of a charity, which yesterday we had 50 people here, 30 young African Americans from all over the country that are talented but underperforming. And this friend of mine
Mm.
started this charity 34 years ago, and he brings them to VMI for a month, and he makes life hard for them. But he teaches them about they have a lot more talent than they believe, and so we have them over to our house, every summer, and we eat in the barn, and then I give them a little speech. And so I'm really, still curious about how do I make a difference in other people's lives.
What book are you reading right now?
Uh, what book am I reading? I have. Let's see. I have to look over here and actually see. Actually, the thing I've been reading is the Coach's Bible.
Haven't heard of that one.
It's a very interesting because it's done in such a way where it gives you ideas about how do you use the stories in the Bible to actually coach people to greater heights. And I got the idea from a guy named Kevin Elko, and Kevin has 27 national championship rings. He's Nick Saban's sage. Um, he's this psychologist who's gone into sports psychology, and so anyway, he's a good friend of mine. He's a client of mine, and I saw him using it, and I thought, well, I'm going to get me one of those and read it. So I try and read that daily. I'm also just started a book called Sharecropper's Wisdom. This guy that I met through this charity, General J.R. Gorham, and I would highly suggest anybody read this book because General Gorham became a general in the National Guard. First, I think, African American general in the National Guard. But he was raised by a sharecropper who had 7 children, and he just learned so much wisdom from it. So I'm just starting into his book. He just signed my book yesterday because he actually drove that. This, you talking about a leader. This guy lives in North Carolina. He lives 3 hours from here. And he came and spoke last week to our board meeting, and he spoke to our kids. He spent a day with our kids. And then he calls me on the phone, and he asked me, he said, "Hey, I hear you having this thing at your house next Saturday. Do you mind if I show up?" I said, "No, General Gorham, I'd love to have you." And he said, "Just don't tell anybody because I want to surprise the kids." Um, and so, I mean, he came yesterday, and I mean, it was like this gigantic, bonus because, I mean, here's somebody who's very, very successful, has climbed, the ladder from being, a sharecropper. He said, I went from being barefoot one day to having boots the next. And the reason he went from
Wow.
barefoot to boots is because he joined the Army. And, but anyway, make a long story short, he wrote a great book called Sharecropper's Wisdom. And it's really about the things that he learned from his dad and his mom.
What's an experience that you're seeking right now to challenge a skill that you're looking to learn or an experience that you'd like to have?
I'm trying to be more tenacious. I read a book summary called "Performing Under Pressure." I'm a big believer in reading book summaries now more than books. I still read 25 books a year, but I also do 100 book summaries a year. And the book summaries I get from a company called Read It For Me, which I happen to own 2.5% of, only because I liked it so much. I bought into it. But every one of their book summaries is 12 minutes or less, so I can do 2 a week in 30 minutes. And so I read
Wow.
one on performing under pressure, and it said success performing under pressure is a function of 4 things: confidence, which I got plenty of, not arrogance, but confidence, because I believe in myself. I always know it's going to be hard, but I always think that that I will find a way to succeed. The next one is optimism, and the third one is tenacity, and then the fourth one is enthusiasm. Well, as I looked at myself and said, okay, if I gave myself a grade on all of these, what grade would I give myself? And I'd give myself an A in confidence. I'd give myself an A in optimism, but I gave myself a B minus in tenacity. And then I gave myself an A in enthusiasm. So I'm trying to be more tenacious. Tenacious. I actually, I meant it to mean more disciplined about what I eat, what I do healthy wise, how much time I spend in business development, just being more aware of how I spend my time.
I love that you defined what tenacity means for you and how it looks in your life. And even just that's something that we're all struggling with, and it's a constant process. So, if you guys are interested in learning more about that book that he mentioned, I'll definitely post it in the show notes. So, Jerry, often we tend to, as Jada Pinkett Smith said, who is a new show host to this new Facebook series that talks about self-awareness, she made a quote that said, "Often we applaud the trials that people blaze in the external world that we can see, but very rarely do we applaud the trials that are blazed in the hidden rooms of the mind that are filled with uncertainty, false beliefs, and pain. It's in these internal obstacles that we must challenge in order to muster the courage to forge new paths that we can see in the world." When I heard that, I thought of you because I know that you did not have your typical upbringing. Your life story is one that is rooted in really overcoming adversity, and talk about tenacious there. What's your life story, Jerry?
Well, I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee. My parents were married 9 times. They married each other twice, so maybe only seven if you count
Oh, wow.
those. Uh, my mother was an alcoholic for 30 years. My stepfather pulled a gun on me twice. Uh,
Ah,
my dad went bankrupt 3 times. We moved all the time because we get thrown out of places. So we grew up, and it was me and my two sisters and my brother, and I was the oldest boy. Um, my parents divorced when I was 13, and at 13, I essentially became the man of the house. And I guess a lot of my drive was really driven, by not wanting to put my children through the same kind of upbringing that I had. And so it was funny yesterday when I had these 50, people here. One of the questions somebody asked me was, "What motivates you?" And I said, that's a great question. I said, first place, all motivation is self motivation.
right.
The second thing is, I said, I am afraid of failure. And I said, I have found fear of failure to be a very powerful motivator. And so when I get in my mind, these negative thoughts, uh, I quickly sort of turn a switch. It's like Dr. Elko says, it's like batting a mosquito. And I just shush them away and I start thinking positive thoughts. You don't achieve anything with negative thinking. You only achieve with positive thinking. And I don't mean, pie in the sky thinking. I just mean realistic thinking. Um, if people want to go to jerryacuff.com, my goal setting system, which is it's only 20 minutes and it's free, so it doesn't cost you anything. Um, I tell people if you watch it 5 times, it'll change your life. Now, it's based on a book called Psycho-Cybernetics by Dr. Maxwell Maltz, which I've read 90 times. But anyway, I used athletics to sort of catapult myself into college, and I owe all of that to a guy named Bud Garrett. And Bud is 92 years old this week, or I don't know when he was 92, but I know he's 92. Um, and when I met Bud when I was in the 7th grade, I was smoking and drinking. I'd been arrested for
Mm.
shoplifting. I was hanging around with the wrong crowd, and I was headed towards being a thug. And first day of school in the 7th grade, he looked at me. He's 6'3", bald headed guy, tough looking guy, and he says, "Boy, you need to be playing football." He said, "I expect
Ah,
you out to practice this afternoon at 3:30. You got that?" And I said, "Yes, sir." So, I'd never played football in my life. I'd thrown a football, but I'd never played football. And as it turns out, he was the greatest motivational influence I had the first 25 years of my life. And he believed in me. And I think the big thing that we need, all of us need, is people that believe in us. The talk that I gave to these young people yesterday was that life is a plural experience. It's not singular. The only time your life is singular is when you live, when you're born, and when you die.
right.
And I said, what most of us need to do is to find people who want to help us succeed. I'd never have been the success that I had been if it weren't for my wife. When I started this job, this business 18 years ago, I had just gotten fired. And I've been fired 3 times in my life. I got fired twice, in 18 months in my first sales job because I couldn't get out of the car and call on customers. I'm so shy. And so,
Mm-hmm.
only when I got a job in the pharmaceutical business, I didn't think it was selling, that I became successful. Now, my boss had a different idea. He thought it was selling, and he taught me how to be successful being me. And I think that's one of the most important lessons all of us can learn is you can be, should be wildly successful just being yourself. And anytime you try and become anything other than your authentic self, you dramatically decrease the likelihood that you'll be successful. Um, so anyway, I've had lots of ups and downs. I had hard time. I got through college, but I got rejected from graduate school at a school that almost anybody can get into. And, I wanted to be a college football coach, and that didn't materialize. So I got in the pharmaceutical business. And then I just had 3 great bosses. I had the guy who hired me was wonderful. His boss, who became my boss for 6 years, was one of the most magnificent people I've ever met. And then my next boss is the person who said to me one day, "You ought to be running our company." And what I realized a long time ago is that we need people to help us see the greatness that's in us that we don't see ourselves. And for almost everybody in the world, there's somebody that wants to help you succeed and can see your greatness that you can't see. As you say, as you quoted, there's so many negative thoughts that go through our mind. Many of those are engendered by the fact that we grow up in lousy situations. We
Yep.
may or may not have a father. We may or may not have a mother. We may or may not have a mentor. We may be going to a lousy school. And, I just say what you have to look for in life is the gifts. I said yesterday, these people here that are running this program are a gift for you. And what you need to do is to understand, what will you do with those gifts? If you leave here and don't make any connections with these people ever again, then you blew your opportunity to take advantage of that gift. So, my life has just been a series of failure followed by determination to succeed, but never capable of succeeding without the help of a lot of people. Now, my company, as you talked about, which is one of the top consulting companies internationally in the life sciences business, and I don't say that only, we've been voted the International Strategic Firm of the Year 3 years in a row. I mean, everybody in my company makes my company better. Hell, every one of them smarter than me. They take these sort of ideas that I started, and then they begin to uh, bloom them. And so I'm just a big believer that, my life story would be nothing if I didn't have had the people who really cared about my success and helped me learn, taught me to learn. And so my bias now is, hey, I owe that to other people. Somebody did it for me. Yesterday, when of these 28 kids that were here, I guess 15, 16 of them waited in line to say, "Would you help me?" And I said,
Mm.
I help anybody who'll call me. And I tell
Yeah,
people,
and he
but
does.
what happens is people prejudge successful people. If
Ah,
you're
that's so true.
if you see yourself, what I would call lower on the the rung of the ladder, and you look at others and say, well, gee, that person's successful, they wouldn't want to have anything to do with me. You'll be right. But the truth is, I told them yesterday, I said, look, I'm not any better than anybody else. I'm just like you. I'm not any different than you. And it doesn't matter that you're younger than I am. It doesn't matter that you come from a different circumstance than I do. We're all human beings. We're all endowed with the greatness that our Creator put in us. And somehow or another, what we've got to do is to find the people that will help us make that greatness become a reality.
I love that. And as a matter of fact, that's advice you gave me, Jerry, that I still recall to this day. I've called Jerry throughout my career many times. I was leading a pharmaceutical sales team, and this team was on the low end of sales. And it was through Jerry's books and his teachings that I was a student of his craft that I helped take my team to number one in the company within 6 months. And throughout my career, as I was experiencing new challenges or having new experiences, I would call Jerry for his advice and his wisdom. And one of the things that he told me when we were actually together at a conference, he said, Shalia, you need to stop putting people on a pedestal. And it was very matter of factly, and it hit home and it gave me a new perspective that I didn't even realize that I was doing that. And he helped ground me in that moment to understand that the basic of all things, we are all human. We are all trying to do the same thing. And you deserve to be in the lane with these people experiencing the same things, talking about the same challenges and successes. And Jerry, you are one of the reasons that I decided to finally launch out and start my own company, because Jerry used to always tell me too, Shalia, you need to figure out how to be in business for yourself.
Yeah, I think more people need to think about that because, I mean, most people, the problem is most people do it when they're, old, like me. I started my own business at 51. If I'd had any sense, I'd have started at 23 because I could have had
Mm,
4 or 5 years of, struggling, but I wouldn't have all the responsibilities that I had, at 51. But it's a great idea. And a lot of times people call me and they want help, about a job. I said, well, have you ever thought about working for yourself?
yeah.
They go, well, I really never thought of that. And I said, well, you ought to give it some thought because candidly, it's not a bad idea. And you might struggle for a while, but if you find what you're passionate about, you can be successful.
And you see what I love about your story, Jerry, is that life challenges all of us in our own unique ways. But when we experience the level of the challenges that you did so early on and still choose to navigate the complexities of success, because in choosing to continue on this path of being successful, you will stumble upon challenges. And some of these challenges, more than anything, are based off of our past experiences. And we have to be conscious and aware of what they are. And we're building our toolbox of strategies to learn how to navigate them to continue on that path. I mean, having a gun pulled on you 2 times by your stepdad, what was going through your mind in that moment? What experience or tool or advice did you pull from to get past that moment and go on to the next?
Well, the first time the first time he did it with my brother and I there. And my brother's bigger than I am. And I just said to him, I said, listen, you fat SOB, you better shoot me or him, but let me promise you, whoever you don't shoot's going to kill you.
Mm,
So he put the gun down. The second time was 4 or 5 years later, and he and my mother were getting a divorce, which he didn't want. And so I went down, and he threatened to kill her. And so I went down
wow.
to Florida, and I found him in a hotel, and I met with him. And the first thing he did is he put a gun between he and I sitting in his hotel room, and he said, I ain't scared of you. And I said, well, I ain't scared of you either. I said, but let me make this really clear. Number one, stop threatening my mother because there's no upside in that. And if by chance you do kill my mother, then one of us will kill you. And then he started
Right.
crying because he understood that what he did was stupid. And what all he was saying was he really loved my mother. And I said, look, I understand all that, but you just can't threaten to kill her. So I guess I've always been a bit not afraid in difficult times. I never
Because you've
really,
experienced some hard
but
ones.
I never really believed he'd shoot me. I mean, I never, you know what I'm saying? He was
Right.
he was a drinker, and I never really believed that he would shoot me. So I don't think I processed it as I'm about to die. I think I processed it as I have to let him know that there's no upside here. And he was not a positive influence in my life or my mother's life. My dad was, and my grandfather was. But one of the things that I was thinking as you were talking, and one of the things I've been really lucky, I've been blessed beyond belief. But almost every aspect of my life, um, or a time in my life after the sixth grade, I had cheerleaders. My athletic
Mm,
coaches were cheerleaders for me. They wanted me to be successful and they worked with me to make me successful. My college coaches, I had two professors in college one who was the foremost expert in the world on the Civil War. And he and I had a great relationship, and I actually named my daughter after him. His name was John Barrett, and her name is Laura Barrett. The other
Wow.
professor was the foremost Shakespeare authority in the world. And he, for some reason, took a shine to me even after he flunked me in romantic poetry. But I passed it the second time, and then I learned Shakespeare from him. But I mean, these are people. I mean, when I graduated from VMI, Colonel Dillard, who was the professor for Shakespeare, he gave me a pair of cufflinks with his initial on one and my initial on the other. And so I've had cheerleaders my whole life. You know, when I went into the tea business, even though I wasn't any good at it, my boss was a guy named Miles Boyd, and Miles was a terrific cheerleader. I just wasn't cut out for, you know, selling Lipton tea in West Tennessee, and because of my introverted personality, I'd sit in the car and I couldn't call on customers. And then when I got in the drug business, I mean, for golly, the first 14 years I was in the drug business, I had the three best bosses in the history of the world. And these were all, and then you've got all these other people that you meet along the way that want you to be successful, you know, your family, your friends, et cetera. And so I think all of us need to be looking for the cheerleaders in our life. I mean, the people that encourage us, that help us through the difficult, you know, the difficult times. And I just think that's one of the most important things you can do. I mean, again, I go back to life's not a singular experience, it's a plural experience. And surrounding yourself with people that help you is really important. You know, I mentor a coach, and I won't tell you who it is, but he makes $4.5 million a year. And he asked me to send him wisdom every 3 or 4 days. And so every 3 or 4 days, I'm sending this person who makes way more money than I do, but he's one of my closest friends. Um, and I've been his mentor for 10 years. But he asked me to send him wisdom. And then he'll send me a message about every other week, and he'll say, I read this 27 times. And so, you know, I'm his cheerleader. The other thing you got to remember, and I think this is really important when you're talking about leadership is lonely. And it's lonely
Yeah.
because it's not a gigantic fraternity. Because you're a leader in one company, there's other leaders in the company, but they're all doing their thing with their people, et cetera. And so finding people that can be someone that you can seek guidance and wisdom from, I think is important. I mean, I have 3 mentors, and, you know, one of them is 62 years old, one of them's 42 years old. And, you know, and they're just smarter than me. And I mean, they're smarter than me about things that I'd like to be smart about. I mean, I rely on you a lot, especially to understand, you know, the Hispanic community. And so I just think
Right.
you got to be humble enough to know that there's lots of people you can learn from, and anybody that you can learn from, you shouldn't pass up that opportunity. You know,
I love how diverse you are in that.
in the you know, when I got a degree in English, I read Wolfgang Goethe's book called Faustus, and then Christopher Marlowe wrote a poem. But there's a place in both the poem and the book that says, if you ever get to a point in your life where you say about this moment, thou art so fair, linger a while. In other words, I am satisfied. He said that's when you start dying. And so my old boss used to say, and the guy who probably changed my life as much or more than anybody, when you're green, you're growing. When you're ripe, you're rotting.
Did you ever experience a moment like that for yourself?
No, because I've never allowed myself to be satisfied with what I've accomplished, because I know there's so much more to accomplish. Now, financially, you know, I mean, we've done okay. You know, we're not going to have any telethons for Jerry, but I mean, you know, there's
Yeah.
only one thing in my life that I would really like to have that I can't afford. In the first place, I don't like super fancy things. I mean, I don't like super fancy cars. I don't like super fancy anything. I mean, we live in a 1832, you know, farmhouse that's, you know, it's an old farmhouse. You know, I'm just a big believer that, you know, first place, one of the reasons that I like having financial success is because of what you can do with it to help other people. You know, and so I have for over 10 years paid for a scholarship at my college to somebody because somebody paid it for me. You
Wow.
know, my wife and I are involved in a number of charities. Now, it's funny. Yesterday, somebody asked my wife a question, and and I said, "Why don't you ask her this question? Ask her why does she ask me 3 days a week for $7?"
And why is that?
Because she teaches she's a jazzercise instructor, and the studio that she teaches in is right next door to a small breakfast place. And there's a homeless guy, he may not be homeless, I think he lives in a shelter, and he doesn't have any money. And so 3 days a week she buys him breakfast, and she doesn't just buy him breakfast. She talks to him. She's gotten to know him. She does what and the thing that I keep telling people, if you have the right kind of heart, you'll be a great leader. Mary Ann is a great leader, and it's because she has this real. And I've always said she's got the biggest heart of anybody I've ever met. But she has a heart. She doesn't see this person as someone beneath her, and she watches people walk past this person and look at him with disdain. She doesn't do that. She says, he's just as good as I am, and he doesn't have the money to buy breakfast, but I do have the money to buy him breakfast, and I'm going to do it. So this morning she left. I gave her $7, and
Mm.
I've never met him, but my point is, when you care about others, truly care about others, it's a gift that actually gives back to you. And so I tell people, giving of your time, giving of your wisdom, giving of your money, giving of your effort, giving of your energy
Yeah.
doesn't cost, it pays. Because the laws of the universe say when you give, you get. And so, I know that Mary Ann gets as much or more out of that relationship than he does.
Oh, I believe you. I strongly believe you. And I've experienced that in my life too. When I mentor at-risk teenagers who have the potential to succeed in life way above than what they see and feel within themselves, but they're at risk for dropping out of school. And anytime that that I spend time mentoring them, I really come out of that experience more gaining more anything than I gave.
Yeah, it's just the law of the universe. When you give, you get.
So, Jerry, I'd love to go back to when you were first starting your career. So here you are, you've had some difficult moments that you've just had to overcome. I mean, just mentally, what you've had to learn about yourself to be able to move through the challenges that you faced through the adversity at home. And now you're starting out your career, just like many of us who, when we turn 18, we realize, okay, it's time to go make some money. And you decide, I'm going to go into sales. At that moment, what was your purpose? Was it, I need to gain some skills? Sales is something that I want to try out. How did that evolve for you in terms of aligning what you intended to do when you first started out your career and as you gained your skills and your experiences, before the titles and the accolades, and when Jerry was sitting there in the car struggling to get out of his car because he couldn't get through the cell and feeling pushy and aggressive?
Yeah, what I said was, this is not for me. Um, and one of the things that I'm a big believer in, and like one of these young kids yesterday said, my big problem is I don't know what I want to do. I said, you're not going to know what you want to do till you're 30, man. I said,
Right.
Mary Ann has a phrase that she said, you have to learn as a young person to morph. Because what happens is you get out of high school, you get out of college, and you take a job, and you really don't know whether that's what your life career is. And if you're going to be an accountant or a lawyer or a doctor, that's a different, or psychologist or nurse. Those are different issues. But I mean, that's a minority of the population. The rest of us usually have to find our passion through trial and error. So, I took the job in coaching because I wanted to be a coach, and then I had to go in the army, and when I got out of the army, the school season had already started, and I couldn't get my job back. So I went into the life insurance business, which in 90 days I ran out of friends and family, so I got fired, and then I got in the Lipton tea business, and I loved my boss, but I just my personality was, I got to push this tea and main dish dinners and Lipton cup of soup on people, and I just didn't feel comfortable doing it. So somebody called me and asked me if I want to get back into coaching, and I did. And then when I got rejected from graduate school and realized that my dream of never being a college coach had expired, then I said, well, I better get a real job. Well, the problem was I wasn't qualified to do anything. I had done poorly in school. I didn't have any great, experience. And by the grace of God, I met a guy named Jim Crutchfield through my college roommate. He said, hey, do you want to be in the pharmaceutical business? And I thought, well, yeah, I'd like to do that. I mean, that's just like PR. And so I got an interview. And let me tell you something, I interviewed in a brown polyester suit. And I said,
Oh, wow.
if somebody lit a match in that room, we'd have both gone up in flames. And and it was funny because years later, the guy who hired me was working for me. I was the VP GM of the business, and he was still a district manager. But he was the district manager because that's what he wanted to be. And I remember asking him one time. I said, Jim, why did you hire me? Because I have to tell you, knowing what I know today, I would never have hired me. I wouldn't have hired anybody with my resume. He said, well, but you were different. And I said, what do you mean? He said, number one, you went to VMI. He said, and VMI is a very difficult place to get through. And if you can get through that, my guess is you can overcome a lot of obstacles. The second thing is, I thought you were pretty smart. And the third thing is, I thought you had good personality and that you could build relationships with people and that you would work hard because you wanted to succeed. So I hired you. And I thought to myself, well, gee, that's one of the major reasons, frankly, why that my wife and I have donated a scholarship to college, because I said to myself when he said that to me, my college, the fact that I went to a military college, credentialed me when I had no credentials. And so what do I owe to my college? To me, I owe paying it back, and I owe a lifetime of service. I've been on the board of the Athletic Foundation for 15 years. I'm the president now. Next year, I'll be the president of all the alumni agencies, which is a $500 million foundation and a $10 million athletic fund. And then the Alumni Association, I'll be in charge of all of that. But it's my way of giving back to a place that made my life possible. And so it wasn't me because I was an idiot. I just got lucky. But what happened to me along the way is I had two things going for me. One is I had a gigantic fear of failure. I did not want to end up like my family.
Right.
And the second thing I had people who entered my life who saw something in me that I was incapable of seeing in myself. And they pushed me and they pushed me and they pushed me. That Bud Garrett guy that I told you about, nobody on the planet was harder on me than Bud Garrett. Nobody. But why was he hard on me? And the people that are hard on you because they see something in you. They see potential in you. Now, some of them are hard on you because they're jerks. But the people in my life who I have found who pushed me were people who cared about me. And they cared so much about me that they wanted me to see what I had the capability of doing that I couldn't possibly understand.
I'm a huge believer that our career is more than just a means to an end. It transcends a lot of that because it allows us the opportunity to enter into a playground and learn a lot about who we are ourselves and who we are with other people and who we are through a variety of the demands of different situations. You spent 20 years in corporate America strategically building your skill set and your toolbox so that you can then go on to build this empire that you have with your consulting firm. In the time that those 20 years that you spent in corporate America, did you ever experience a toxic culture or a bad boss or a difficult coworker? And how did you respond to it?
Well, I was lucky. I did have a boss when I finally got to the headquarters who made it very clear, even though I had been the top district manager out of 7 out of 8 years, he made it very clear to me that I reported to his secretary. And he was very negative to me. And so, but I'm a big believer. Douglas MacArthur said, security is the ability to produce. So I really wasn't worried about them getting rid of me because I knew I would land someplace else. So he writes me a nasty letter about my expense report, which was his letter was illegitimate. My expense report was totally legitimate.
We're setting the record straight.
Well, we had this policy that you don't entertain home office people in New Jersey because it's where the home office was. Well, I had entertained this person in San Francisco because she was giving me a briefing on the people that I had to interview. And so I just took her to a restaurant, spent $25, she and I, and then put it on my expense report. And then he sends me a note and says, "You need to see me about this. This is against company policy." So I tore up the note, knowing that sooner or later he'd walk into my office and ask me, well, what's going on. So sure enough, one night, 3 o'clock, he walks in, and now his boss had been the person who was my sort of sponsor, and he's the one who brought me in. And he said, "Hey, I wrote you a note about your expense report and you never responded." I said, "Yeah, I tore it up." He said, "You tore it up?" I said, "Yeah, I tore it up. Why?" I said, "Let me make this really clear to you." I said, "If you ever in your life send me a note like that again, I will quit. I will walk into Jerry McMurtry's office and I will quit. I am not going to put up with your crap. You understand that?" But
Right.
he never wrote me another note. And then 4 years later, he was working for me.
Look at that.
Now, well, I told him, I said, "If you'd have looked at it," I said, "John, if you'd have looked at it, you would have seen that I did this someplace else." So the thing that bothers me is that you didn't care enough to find out the truth. You wanted to give me a
Yes.
bunch of grief, and I'm not putting up with that. I don't need to put up with it. I don't need you, and I don't need this company.
And that's the thing, Jerry. You had been through so much and you knew what you were capable of doing, that you were playing that long-term goal as a leader.
Right.
It's not just in that moment. You saw the bigger picture. So you were confident in each move that you needed to take because you were confident in your ability and your skill set, but even more so where it was going to take you. That was stronger than that little moment that you experienced. And so here Jerry is, he went from a sales representative in Virginia to leading a $650 million company with over 1,000 employees. I mean, he climbed the ladder. He took his experiences. Not only does he read, Jerry's an avid reader, but he is always looking for different experiences to apply what he reads, learn about himself, learn through others, and grow through it. And that paid off because he climbed the ladder and he climbed quick. And so then Jerry gets to a point in his life where now you're about to enter into entrepreneurship. You're considering starting your own company. What was that journey like for you in those beginning stages?
Well, I really wasn't. I never really considered being an entrepreneur, to be honest with you. What happened was I was VP of sales of a training company and I got fired. And I was living in Phoenix. I had enough money to last me 4 months. I had a 1 year old and I was 51 years old. And I couldn't find anybody to hire me. So a guy a good friend of mine called me and asked me to do a speech, which I would have charged probably $10,000 for. And I asked him, I said, "Why do you want to do the speech?" He said, "Well, trying to change these people's behavior." And I said, "Well, then you'd be wasting your money because you're not changing people's behavior with a speech." And I said, "Now, if you're dying to write me a check, just write me a check and I'll come give your speech. But if you're wasting your money." He said, "Well, what do I need?" So I told him what he needed, and he said, "Well, send me a proposal for that." So honestly, I didn't have a company. So I walked down the street. My guy lived 5 doors down, was a lawyer, and I said, "Hey, can you start me an LLC and call it Delta Leadership Group?" I wanted it to sound like it was more than just me and Mary Ann.
Right.
And so I did the first project for him for $45,000, and then 4 weeks into it, he hired me to do another one for $75,000. So the first 4 months I was in business, I made $123,000. And then
You said the first few months?
first 4 months. So, but it was all, just luck. I mean, the first project was a change management project, which I'm really good at. And I think I've done 3 of them in 18 years. But in the middle of the first project, he asked me, he said, "Hey, we got this product that we're doing $350 million and we think it should be doing a lot more." He said, "You think you could help us figure out how to sell it?" He said, "When you were my boss, you were really good at figuring out how to sell stuff." And I said, "Yeah, I'll take a look at it." So he said, "Send me a proposal." So I did. And the product went from, I think in 2 years, 350 million to $1 billion. And I would say I was probably 20% of that. But 20% of 650 million is 100 million. And they paid me probably 150,000. So then I got a reputation as, if you have a product that's hard to sell, then Jerry can help you. And basically, that's what we built our business on. So a lot of it was luck. It wasn't, I'm dying to be an entrepreneur. I'm dying to have a company with
Right.
20 or 30 people. I'm dying to be a best-selling author. I'm dying to be, CEO of the year 3 times in Arizona. I just rejected that award for the 4th time. So I said, this is ridiculous. You people must not have any other CEOs in Arizona.
Oh,
And, we've been International Strategic Advisory Firm of the Year 3 years in a row. None of that. And I had none of those plans. What I wanted to do was to grow a $5 million business. I always said, if I could grow a $5 million business, I could be in business more than 5 years. Most businesses don't make it 5 years. I'd be successful. So, we're significantly over $5 million and we're 18 years in business next month.
wow. Talk about setting a stretch goal.
I didn't have an idea to be an entrepreneur. I tell people and I do a lot of entrepreneurship conferences, and I'll tell people, not all entrepreneurs are people with great ideas. Some of them are idiots like me who got fired and can't find a job. And so they go find something to do on their own and then wake up and say, hey, that might actually be able to make me a decent living.
Quite a journey there that you've been on. And so and talk about stretch goals, that's something that near and dear. I mean, not only do you teach it, but that was a huge stretch goal that you set for yourself. You set the expectation of where you wanted to go and what your intention was going to look like to get there. How did you go out as a new business owner? Who did you seek to help you set that expectation? Because you've never done this before, and help you understand what this process would feel and look like along the way?
That's a great question. One of the things I told these young people yesterday, and I tell everybody, there's 2 things that we all need to be successful, and it doesn't matter what you do for a living. One is you need to be great at what you do. I mean, I want my dentist to be great. I want my doctor to be great. I want my dry cleaner to be great. I want that sushi restaurant to be great, and it is. The second thing is you need a network of people that can help you be successful. So what I did, and this is really funny. I did a program last week in Charleston, and one of the things I was talking about was, the relationships aren't important; they're everything. And I said, what's really interesting about my business, and then we've done probably, pick a number, $80 million over the last 18 years in business. And I said, of the $80 million that we've done, I can trace probably 85% of it to 2 people. And that was, which was interesting. And what was really funny was one of the people in the audience was a young woman who came up to me and said, hey, I just sent you a LinkedIn, and you and I have a mutual connection called Alex Kinch. And I said, his father is one of the 2 people I talked about this morning.
Look at that.
So what I found was that 2 people, there's people in life that are connectors. I'm a connector. I connect people to other people that I think would benefit them. And Greg Kinch and David Snow were connectors. And I can trace so much of my business back to those 2 people. And so if you do like a genealogy tree, with my business and say, where did this come from? It really came from 85% from those 2 people. So what I did is I used my relationships to say, hey, this is what I'm doing. And if you know anybody that's interested in this, let me know. And I don't call and try and sell anybody anything. I just call and say, hey, this is what I'm doing. Tell me what you think. And if you know anybody that you think would be interested in this, that could benefit from, a service like this, let me know. And that's how the business grew.
What do you think stops most people from building meaningful relationships?
Their mindset that the other person's more important than they are, or that they can't bring any value to the relationship. And then I think there's a basic lack of understanding of the difference between a personal relationship and a valuable business relationship. See, I have lots of personal relationships. Very few of them, but some are also personal. And so I teach people how do you build a valuable business relationship. And as you know, I've written 3 books on that. So I try and get people to actually learn how to build a relationship with people you don't naturally connect with, because that's about 60 to 70% of the people you meet. And yet some of those people are important to you. And then also teach people how do you leverage relationships with people that you already have a relationship with that you don't know who they know that could benefit you. So I think the biggest thing is people really don't know how do you go about building a valuable business relationship, which is, what I have a virtual training program on and what I have a book on. Um, but I think once people learn that, I mean, I did these 2 sessions last week. I would say 60% of the people in there were over 45 or 50 and taking pages of notes on things they could do, not gigantic ideas, but what I call tiny tweaks that create big impact, ways to build relationships with people that you don't naturally connect with, ways to meet people that you'd like to meet but you don't know. And I teach all of that stuff. And I think the big thing is that people prejudge. I mean, people say to me all the time, I was going to call you, but I know how busy you are. Well, first place, you have no clue how busy I am. You just don't. And don't prejudge whether I would talk to you or not. If you want to call me, call me. If you call me and I don't answer, if I don't return your call, then I'm a jerk. And that's probably a good thing for you to know. If you call me and I help you, then that's probably a good thing to know too. But don't judge somebody else just because in your mind they are more successful or more important than you are, because they may be more successful. They damn sure ain't more important.
Jerry is somebody who doesn't just talk the talk. He is someone who walks the walk. When I first got into a relationship with Jerry in terms of our mentorship in the beginning, any time and every time that I reach out to Jerry, he is always reaching back out within 24 hours. And if not, letting me know, hey, let's reconnect at this time. And he always finds a way to give anyone the time of day who connects with him and wants to seek a relationship with them. He'll foster it. And that is just one of the prime examples of leadership, is that you're pouring back into others and you're creating impact all around you. Jerry, what has been the most significant resource that you would say has helped you in your journey to success that now can help others achieve their success?
I think it's the people who have supported me. The number one would be my wife. I mean, Marianne is a person who's always there through thick and thin. She's got great advice. And the other thing is just all the people who I have built relationships with who value a relationship with me and want to help me succeed and are willing to proactively help me succeed. I mean, I'll give you a simple example. I had a physician in Birmingham when I was there, and he never wrote a prescription for any of my products, but he was the most important person in town because he introduced me to every no-see doctor in Birmingham. And so why did he do that? Well, because he thought they should meet somebody like me who was not your average pharmaceutical rep. And so I would say the most important thing I've had is the right people to support me. And I would certainly include the people in my company. I mean, my gosh, I have the most wonderful employees in the world. Like my president, Matt Murphy, I think is the greatest consultant in the pharmaceutical industry. Deborah Horner, who's the vice president for us, is incredible. Our head of operations is unbelievable. And all of these people bring their own genius to our work. And our company is, I mean, I own it, Marianne, I own it, but it's nothing without these people. It's nothing.
You've built an online platform that allows people to really get to see behind the scenes all these insights, your years and years of experience of figuring it out, learning and failing and succeeding. You've crafted the perfect training for those who are seeking to learn what you've learned. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes. I mean, I call it the Superstar Selling Academy. And basically, there's 4 components. One is how do you set and achieve stretch goals, which is free. And so if you go to jerryacuff.com, you just say sign up for the training, and then it tells you, you don't have to buy anything. It just says the goals course is free. The second thing I teach people is about the business relationship blueprint. It's how do you build valuable business relationships. The third component is the Superstar Selling Academy, which is how do you become great at selling, regardless of whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, and how do you do it without ever being pushy and aggressive? Because the thing that I found that was a disconnect for me, and the thing that ran me out of these other businesses and sales, was I felt like they were forcing me to be pushy and aggressive, and that's the antithesis of my personality. And so once I learned how do you become successful at selling without being pushy and aggressive, I created a whole system around that. And then the last thing is for coaches, for people who coach salespeople. We call it Superstar Sales Coaching Academy. And it's how do you coach salespeople to get better at selling? What's fascinating about sales coaches is they get lots of training on coaching. Coaching, as most companies define it, is the conversation that the sales manager has with the employee about imperfect performance. We think that what there needs to be a greater emphasis on is how do you actually teach the person to be better at selling. And so we have identified the 8 critical components of what it takes to be great at selling. And then we teach people with our virtual training, how do you do that? Now, the beautiful thing about virtual training really is the perfect training because, number one, it should have world-class content. Secondly, it should have repetition. And if you have virtual training, then you basically have me 24/7. And you can watch it over and over and over again. And there's ways to put, favorite things that you watch. 95% of my lessons are 5 minutes or less, so you can watch it on your iPhone or your Android or whatever, and you can watch it in little lessons. And then it also, we teach people how do you do these things. And so, if you really want to learn, you practice the things that we teach. We've actually got in the selling part, for all of the critical selling things, we actually have actors playing out generic selling scenarios, and then we give people 4 or 5 choices, and whatever choice you choose, I come on and tell you whether that's the right one or the wrong one. If it's the wrong one, I tell you why it's wrong. If it's the right one, I tell you why it's right. And if you go through all of those, I think there's like 75 or 80 of those scenarios, you'll know more about selling than you ever thought you could. So that's if you go to jerryacuff.com, you can actually, take a look at that.
Perfect. I'll be sure to include that in the show notes. Everyone is in sales, whether you recognize it or not. And through selling and the trainings that Jerry teaches, you're able to learn so many significant nuggets of wisdom that can completely change the course that you're on and even amplify it. So I am so excited to share that resource with you guys. Jerry, how can people connect with you?
J Acuff at deltapoint.com and J Acuff at deltapoint.com. And if you go on jerryacuff.com, my cell phone number's on there.
Jerry, thank you so much.
You're more than welcome. I really appreciate you having me. And I hope your listeners got some ideas here that'll help them bring out the greatness that's in them.
Oh, absolutely. Without a doubt. Guys, wherever you are listening today, thank you for tuning in today. It was definitely a treat to hear Jerry's journey and the phenomenal success and impact that he's creating as a leader. Wishing you guys the best. See you next time on our next episode. If you found even the smallest nugget of wisdom in this episode, share it with a friend and your friend will thank you. Let's continue the conversation with like-minded leaders and join us on Facebook at Go Flip the Script. Until next time, I challenge you to incorporate what you learned today to evolve your leadership impact.